All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Alan Seid. The work that I'm going to be presenting to you tonight, I've been studying since 1995, so about 23 years. And I've been a certified trainer since 2003, so almost 16 years. I've worked in all kinds of contexts. I travel internationally to teach this work. I teach it in online workshops. And it's really, really exciting to be here with you because I quit doing workshops locally for about 10 years so that I could figure out the internet. And I figured it out to an extent. And I really want to serve the local community. I want to bring it back local, and I'm really glad that you're here. Basic guideline for any of my workshops is I am counting on you to take care of your own needs. Like, I want you to take responsibility for your needs being met. So if something's not working for you, I may not psychically pick up on that. So I encourage you to speak up. There's tea over there with hot water. You can, if you get up I'm mid-sentence, you get up and go get some tea, that's perfect. Right? Restrooms are through the store, around the corner, in the hallway back here. Just leave the key. The keys are already in there. Just leave it in there. So essentially, if you get up and just leave in the middle of me talking, I'm assuming that you're taking care of your needs. And if you don't speak up, I might not know that something isn't working for you. So I just wanted to give that as a basic kind of guideline. I'm here as part of a team. So I would love it if I want to recognize Tess and Joshua and Don and Kara and also Justin. Justin is support person to Kara. So thank you guys for helping to put these events on for the community. Yeah. And we have a guest trainer coming first weekend in February from Poland. She happens to be teaching at a 9-day intensive in LA, and we snagged her. We're flying her up here to do a weekend with us. So I'll talk a little bit more about at the end. Welcome, welcome. So I want to just do a reset of the reticular activating system. It's a filter in our brains that helps us to decide what's important and what's not important. And so I just want to do a kind of a reset of that. And part of it is that sometimes people come to these workshops or other workshops and they're looking for something. And so they're looking for something round, right? And a triangle shows up and they miss it because they were looking for that round thing. That's just a metaphor, obviously. Anyone here ever, like, say you're looking for a car and maybe it's a Subaru or maybe it's a Volkswagen, and as soon as you're looking, like, suddenly you see a lot of those cars? That's the reticular activating system. It helps you filter out things that you consider not important to pay attention to. So the brain is a great servant sometimes. So I invite you to find something in the room that has blue. Okay, now find another one. Okay, now find another one. Okay, now find another one. I'm looking at a couple jackets back there. Okay, now whenever you're ready, close your eyes and see if you can picture the room in your mind's eye. Where's all the brown in the room? Okay, now you can open your eyes. Like the whole floor is brown. The chairs. So just, I want you to be, let's use a baseball metaphor. I want you to have your knees loose, your glove well oiled, so to speak. Like, be ready for what might be coming because it might be different than what you thought you were looking for. Okay. Any other housekeeping from the team? We got the restrooms, the tea. We end at 9. Take care of yourself. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Tess. One of the needs I really want you to take responsibility for is your own need around learning and growth. So, again, if I mispronunciatify a word and you're like, what did he say? Please ask. That's why you're here, and that's my job. Just if I said something and you're not clear what it is, I'd like to help clarify.
Real quick, what was that term you used? Reticulating activator.
The reticular activating system.
Thank you.
Yeah, also known as the reticular filter. Yeah, you can look it up. Yeah. I want to welcome my brother from another mother, Atul Deshmani. All right, moving on. I'd like to set the tone by doing a little reading. And boy, it'd be really, really sweet to read some Mary Oliver since she just passed away. But let's do this one. This is called Walk, Don't Run, and it's by Rob Bell. Walk, don't run. That's it. Walk, don't run. Slow down, breathe deeply, and open your eyes because there's a whole world right here within this one. The bush doesn't suddenly catch on fire. It's been burning the whole time. Moses is simply moving, slowly enough to see it. And when he does, he takes off his sandals. Not because the ground has suddenly become holy, but because he's just now becoming aware that the ground has been holy the whole time. Efficiency is not God's highest goal for your life, neither is busyness, or how many things you can get done in one day, or speed, or even success. But walking, which leads to seeing. Now that's something. That's the invitation for every one of us today. And every day, in every conversation, interaction, event, and moment, to walk, not run, and in doing so, to see a whole world right here within this one. In some of the smaller workshops I do, and some of the ongoing, I'm doing a multi-session, like a real skill builder. Tonight's going to go by so fast. You remember what I just said, because at the end you're going to be like, man, he was right, that went by fast. I'm doing a multi-session thing in March, and we often will do a little bit more of a check-in, like how are you doing? And if we did that here, it would take the whole 2 hours. So I'm going to skip that part. But I do invite you to think about the relationships in your life. Raise your hand if you have relationships in your life. Sweet. Who finds those like stressful, confusing, confounding? Maybe not all of them, but largely. Yeah. The interpersonal space is super confusing and murky, especially if you happen to be like a engineering type or a, it's like when I went to my first workshop with Marshall Rosenberg, my first couple workshops, I was pretty disappointed. Marshall Rosenberg, by the way, is the man who created this process, Nonviolent Communication, also known as NVC. I'll share a little bit more about that. But I was disappointed because I was looking for a formula or a recipe. Do A, then B, then C, and your interpersonal relationships will be cleared up. And it doesn't work that way. I was so disappointed. Instead, what I found were various toolboxes, and then learning how to use those toolboxes. And they're generally 3 areas that these tools live in. Imagine that this is a tree. We'll call this ground level. One area that I can put my attention is in how I express myself. Every communication process has 2 parts, at least, speaking and listening, also known as giving and receiving. So how do I show up? How do I express myself in a way that's genuine, that's real? Any people pleasers in here? Conflict avoiders? Me too. I'm a recovering conflict avoider. And I'm very grateful to a friend of mine who once said to me, Alan, I noticed that you tend to preserve harmony in the group pretty well, but you're holding back on speaking your truth, and I think that that's hurting the group and you. So grateful to her, and then through nonviolent communication, I realized that I could have both. I could have harmony and full, authentic self-expression. How to be real. So if anyone came in here thinking that nonviolent communication or NVC is about being nice, It's not about being nice. It's about being real in a way that can also be compassionate. So the listening side, in NVC we call that empathy. Most of the time, it's in silence, silent empathy. Occasionally, we'll demonstrate that we're understanding what the other person said by telling them back what we heard. Have you ever had somebody say, I understand, but you're not really sure if they understood? Yeah, so in NVC, instead of saying I understand, I like to demonstrate my understanding by telling the person back what it is I heard. So sometimes that's out loud, but a lot of times we're just present, and the other person really experiences our presence in how we listen to them. The last area, self-connection. When I teach at 9-day intensives, I tell people they can be practicing all day. All day, their attention can be in one of these three areas. You can be expressing yourself, or you can be present with somebody else, or you can be connecting with yourself. What's going on for me? What am I wanting? What am I needing? What's motivating me? Gosh, I have this feeling something's up. What is that? Where's that coming from? It turns out that this self-connection piece, and I think every spiritual tradition worth anything has said, know thyself. So it turns out that this piece tends to be a limiting factor on these other two. Like if I don't know what's going on inside me, how honest can I be with you? I can say, I don't know what's going on inside me. I can be that honest. But not a whole lot more. Or let's say that I've got this the storm. I'm holding a storm. I'm all churned up inside. How present am I going to be able to be for you if you're needing a listening ear? So this self-connection piece is a limiting factor for the other two. It's also a supportive factor. To the extent that you're self-connected, you're more able to be present for somebody or more able to express something that's really genuine from the heart. So I'd like you to think of a conversation that was hard for you. Think of a conversation that you've had in the last month or so that was challenging, just not really that fun. And I'm going to ask you to turn to the person next to you. Actually, think of it first, and listen to the instructions first. I want you to tell the person next to you, what was it that was important to you in that conversation? Notice the tendency to get into the story of it all. Here's what I mean. Like the other day when I was standing in line at the Mount Baker Theater, then there was this little boy there, and I was like, what's going on with this little boy? And then this woman came in, and she got in line next to the little boy, and I thought, okay, cool, they're together. But then like they were with a group of 10 people, and all these 10 people came in, and they got in the line, and then like that's what I mean by getting in the story of it all. And you're missing that deeper level of like, so what was important to me? What was it about that interaction that didn't work? So go ahead. Think of a difficult conversation and then tell the person next to you, what was it that was important to you in that conversation? I'll give you a few minutes each. Ready, set, go. Okay. Did anybody really, really need more time? Raise your hand. Okay. All right. Well, let's hear a couple examples. Like, what was important to you?
To be heard and understood.
Okay. If I call it understanding, does that cover both of them for you?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Understanding / I'll add to be heard. Yeah. Awesome. Any other examples? What was important to you?
I wanted to be included, to be appreciated.
Yes. Ooh, I love both of those. Inclusion, appreciation. Oh.
I would define it as something that was beneficial to all parties.
Something that was beneficial to all parties. Ooh, That's exciting. Hold on. I'm trying to pick a color. Something beneficial to all parties. I have a follow-up question. If you found something beneficial for all parties, then what would you have?
A great night. Happiness, joy, unity.
Ooh, okay. Does harmony fit in there?
Yeah. Good word.
Okay. Unity, harmony, fun, like that? Like togetherness? Is it like connection? Is that? Oh, okay. Give me a second. Harmony, fun, connection. I'll put unity in there. You know, I wonder. Yeah, because if you had unity, then you would have connection and harmony, right? Okay, so I'll leave that one out. Here and then back there.
Reciprocal curiosity.
Reciprocal curiosity.
Feel curiosity back.
Reciprocal curiosity. So if you had reciprocal curiosity, then what would that give you?
Connection.
Cool. What else would it give you, do you think? Can I throw out a guess?
Yes.
I'm checking it out with you. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. Mutuality?
Sure.
Okay. Mutuality. Yes.
I think mine was reciprocal investment in the conversation with thinking curiosity. So.
Okay. So is it covered in here? Okay. Awesome. Great. I saw another hand here. Yeah. Fairness. Fairness. That's a really interesting one. So if you had fairness, then what would you have? Can I throw out mutuality? Oh, can I throw out another guess? If you experience fairness in that situation, then would it allow you to trust that your needs matter? Yeah? All right. See, that's in here. Maybe just a couple more, because I think people are getting the point, and I'll explain why I put some outside of the circle. I lost track of whose hand I saw first. Solutions. So you wanted some solutions. And then if you had solutions, let me write that one down. Solutions. If you had solutions, then what would that give you? Okay. I'm just going to call it peace for brevity. Peace. Yeah, peace of mind. Like calmness and presence. Cool. One more. Yeah. To be treated with respect. Ooh. Another tricky one. That one is almost like it kind of crosses the border here. And I'll explain why this circle and what that means. But if you were treated with respect, then what would you have, or what would that give you? Is it this one? To trust that you matter to the other person? I'm wondering. I'm not trying to talk you into it.
And that might be part of it.
Yeah.
But
Here's a synonym I like for respect. See if it works for you. Consideration. Does that have resonance for you?
yeah.
A little bit? You were about to say something, and I think I cut you off.
No, I think I was just drilling in my head.
Okay. Yeah, pondering these. So the reason I'm asking these questions, like if you had that, then what would you have, is these are actually tools that you can use. And I call it peeling the layers of the onion to go deeper to the universal human needs. And I'm going to keep using this term this evening, universal human needs. By universal, it means that all humans have them. But the word need is really tricky. So I want to be very, very clear what I mean when I use the word need, because there's something I don't mean. And I don't mean that there's a sense of lack. When I say need, like I have a need for consideration or I have a need for connection, I don't mean that there's something lacking. I'm talking about an energy that we're calling connection, or that we call mutuality, something I value, something that's important to me. So universal human needs, you can think of them as values, except that values aren't necessarily universal. So one way to think of these is the things inside the circle. The conditions necessary for life to thrive, for any human being, regardless of culture or geographic location. All humans need these things and others in order to thrive, right? Love isn't in here, creative expression, trust. This is what I mean by universal human needs. Another way of thinking of universal human needs is core human motivators. It's what impels us to act or to speak. It's what is motivating us at a deeper level, whether we're conscious of it or not. So for example, if I said, hey Joshua, I need that window open. And he could get curious. He's willing to open the window, but he could get curious. He could say, hey, I notice you use the word need, but all 8 billion people don't need that window open. So if you had that window open, then what would that give you? Using those questions to peel the layers of the onion and go deeper. And I would explain, if that window, it feels a little stuffy in here, so if that window was open, it'd give me some air. And then he'd say, well, if you had air, then what would you have? Well, I'd feel more comfortable. And he just keeps going because he's so curious. He's like, so if you felt more comfortable, then what would you have? Well, then I'm teaching a workshop, so I'd be more present. Okay, so if you were more present, then what would that give you? Well, it would give me reassurance that I'm being of service to the workshop participants. Okay, so if you were of service to the workshop participants, then what would you have? Well, then I'd have some real certainty that I'm walking my life purpose. So we went from the window to life purpose in about 5 steps. The needs are the deeper needs, what's motivating us. The reason I wrote some outside the circle is because I think of those more as strategies, which are important. Strategies are super important. They're the ways that we get our needs met. So they're important. They're just not universal. Give you an example. I have a need for safety and protection. We all do. When I get home, my strategy might be I go out and I get to know all my neighbors. That strategy might contribute to my sense of safety and protection. Another one of my neighbors, they get a few pit bulls and an expensive alarm system. Same need, safety and protection. Just different strategies. Another one of my neighbors, they lock themselves up in their house with triple bolt, close all the blinds, and they hide under the covers. That's their strategy. Another one of my neighbors buys a couple of assault rifles. That's their strategy. Totally different strategies. But the need is the same. The core human motivator is the same, safety and protection. Conflicts happen at the level of the strategies, of the ways people are trying to meet their needs. The conflicts don't happen at the level of needs because we all have the same needs. I work as a professional mediator. I don't market myself as a mediator because there's other things that I prefer to do. But I do work as a mediator. And what I've discovered is that if you can distill any conflict to the underlying universal human needs, people start to see each other human to human. And conflicts tend to dissolve themselves. I've seen it happen hundreds of times. I've facilitated these conversations or been a participant in these conversations hundreds and hundreds of times. So I just wanted to start to build consciousness around needs, around universal human needs. So just keep in mind that when we're talking about needs, we're not talking about the judgment, you're so needy. We're not talking about that. And we're not talking about a sense of lack. When I'm talking about needs, I'm talking about an energy that wants to flow, not a hole that wants to be filled. Needs are an energy that wants to flow, not a hole that wants to be filled. I walked up to Marshall Rosenberg, the founder of this process, Nonviolent Communication. I walked up to him during a break in a workshop, And I said, Marshall, give me another definition for needs because I'm not getting it. And he said, how life is seeking to show up in this moment. I was like, let me sit with that for half a year until you come back to Seattle. How is life showing up in him, in her, in me, in this moment? So it's like if you're looking out on the water and there's all these little waves, needs are a little bit like that. It's like the present need is like a wave. So right now it might be trust, but the next moment it might be connection, and the next moment it might be integrity. What's coming up that's important, the present need. We all have all of them all the time. So I wanted to introduce this concept of universal human needs because they're what motivates us, and distinguishing between needs and strategies is one of the keys to preventing and resolving misunderstandings and conflicts. I just did a class a couple weekends ago. I recognize a couple people here who were there. It was a 12-hour intro. Tonight we get a 2.5-hour intro. Like I said, it's going to feel like it went by fast. I want to do more exercises and give you as many tools as I can in the time we have. I don't know that I can get you to black belt in one evening, but that's the goal, ultimately. And when I say black belt, it has a connotation of mastery, but it also is a tip of the hat to a martial art called Aikido, which is a martial art of peace. How do you neutralize an attack in a way that preserves the integrity of both parties? So that's what we're talking about. And there's some movements from Aikido that we use as metaphors also for this work. Probably won't be doing that tonight, just because of lack of space. Any questions so far? Just anything? Questions, comments, feedback?
Could you just repeat that? How do you neutralize an attack in a way that
Preserves the integrity of both parties. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could you also repeat the other definition for needs?
I gave several. Core human motivators.
How life shows up for...
Yeah, how life is seeking to show up in this moment. How life is seeking to show up. In you, in you, in you. What's the aliveness? I barely survived school. Because I got it pretty quickly that it was more about obedience to authority than it was about the content of what they're teaching. And so you get a bunch of like high energy kids and make them sit in rows with low ceiling and fluorescent lights, and don't you frickin' squirm and raise your hand if you want to go to the bathroom. Well, maybe that made sense 200 years ago when we needed more compliant workers for factories. But not anymore. And what we find is that people who are connected to their needs, people who are connected to the intrinsic motivators in them, don't make good robots or slaves. They don't get pushed around too easily. That doesn't work too well when it's about like behavior management. So, anyway. I have kids and they're school age, and so we're exploring these topics. So let me slow myself down and just explain the name, Nonviolent Communication. I guess let me slow myself down even more and see if there are any other questions or comments or feedback. All right. So Nonviolent Communication, I really don't like the name. Doesn't do it for me. That's what Marshall chose to call it. And I understand why he chose to call it that. He wanted to align himself with Mahatma Gandhi's social movement of nonviolence. And is anybody here not familiar with Gandhi? I'm just checking, because increasingly I meet people who aren't. Like sometimes I'll do a workshop in a high school, and a lot of the high school students, the ones who are willing to be honest, they'll be like, I don't know who he is. Right? Led a movement to kick out a colonial invading power without a war. That was unprecedented. It had never happened before. For all the limitations of Gandhiism as a social movement afterwards, which people debate, and I'm not a Gandhian scholar, but that's where Marshall drew his inspiration. He was trying to align himself with this movement of nonviolence. It was just Martin Luther King Jr. Day yesterday, right? Student of Gandhi's. It turns out in India, in Hindi, they had two words for what they meant that had no translation into English. I'll just write them up here real quick. Ahimsa and Satyagraha. Satyagraha. And ahimsa roughly means, I am not your enemy, or like harmlessness toward all beings. It's a little bit akin to the Buddhist concept of loving kindness.
I use the term peace.
Peace, yeah. Yeah, it's like a peacefulness toward others. Yeah, totally. But there's no direct translation into English, so we have all these meanings. And then the other one, Satyagraha, roughly means soul force or soul truth or the power of the truth. So we took these two terms, the power of the truth and loving kindness, and in English we called it nonviolence. Part of my issue with it is it doesn't tell you what it is, it tells you what it's not. Yeah. And it's the same in Spanish. So we have other names for it. Compassionate communication. Empathic communication, because empathy is such a big part of it. Empowered communication, because it's about being connected to your own power. Lots of names for it. Some people call it conscious communication. And we also have these metaphors of the giraffe and the jackal that we use as teaching tools. So sometimes people call it giraffe language. But it's just a metaphor. It has nothing to do with the real animals out there in nature. These are human projections, the jackal and the giraffe, as metaphors. The giraffe is the metaphor for nonviolent communication. The jackal would be the metaphor for its opposite, life-disconnected, life-alienating communication, the type of thinking and language that blocks connection. So the metaphor of the giraffe, because you might hear this if you explore this work further, is that it's one of the land animals with the largest heart. It's so tall that it has a perspective that anytime I meet my needs at the expense of somebody else's needs, in the long run, my needs will also not be met. Anytime I set up a win-lose situation, in the long run, I also lose. Because you reap what you sow. Right? For me, karma is not an esoteric concept. For me, karma is the law of cause and effect. I mean, the CIA even has a name for it. They call it blowback. It's just you reap what you sow. What goes around comes around. Yeah.
I wanted to add that the reverse of that is also true. If you're meeting other people's needs at the expense of your own, it's similarly unsustainable.
Yes. Did anyone not hear what she said? That the inverse is true if you're meeting other people's needs at the expense of your own. That ends up also being unsustainable, ultimately. Thank you, Tess. Yes. Love it. So, yeah, that's part of the metaphor of the giraffe. I also learned recently that they have a gland in their mouth that produces a substance that dissolves thorns because they're eating from an acacia tree, which is a thorny tree. I haven't fact-checked that one, but it fits the metaphor. So that's a little bit about the name, kind of where it comes from. And Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, PhD, he called himself a recovering psychotherapist because he was trained in a language of labeling and putting people in boxes, and it became a static diagnosis, whereas life is actually in process. It's dynamic. But he was a student of a famous psychologist named Carl Rogers. And one thing Carl Rogers was really interested in at the time was, how is it that authentic human connection can be so healing? Because sometimes the roles that we inhabit in our lives actually get in the way of authentic human connection. The role parent-child, or the role teacher-student, or the role therapist-patient, or boss-employee. I'm talking to this person who has the label boss, and I don't even see a human being. I just see boss. Or if I'm the boss, I get to hide behind my role and not present myself as a vulnerable, real human being. So sometimes the roles can get in the way of authentic human connection. Either we're relating to a role or we can hide behind a role. They don't always have to get in the way. It's just that it's common that they can. So Marshall set out to identify what are the essential elements in language that contribute to the high quality of connection we're looking for. So that brings me to the purpose of nonviolent communication. The purpose of NVC is to create a high quality of connection, out of which people spontaneously, naturally enjoy contributing to one another's well-being. When I studied with Marshall, he had been traveling the world for 35, 40 years, mediating conflicts all over the world and training people. And he said all over the world, in every culture, people are playing one of two games. One of those games is called Who's Right and Who's Wrong? And the other game is called How Can I Make Life More Wonderful? So this game, this mindset, this approach to interactions and relationships of how can I contribute? How can I make life more wonderful? Is so different from me being in the mindset of, okay, who's right and who's wrong? And who's good and who's bad? And therefore, who deserves to be rewarded or punished? Of course, I get to decide, right? Who is what? Again, this jackal thing is static. The verb to be is so important. So, again, the purpose is to create a high quality of connection out of which, naturally, spontaneously, we're going to want to play this game. How can I make life more wonderful? Anybody here ever had a lunch guest or dinner guest and you cooked for them and they really enjoyed what you made? How did that feel to you? Awesome. Any other feelings?
Pride.
You felt proud of it. Yeah, pride. Like it's really satisfying, right? Fulfilling. Now, imagine this dinner guest threatens you to feed them. What happens to that natural generosity, that natural joy of giving? You better feed me or else. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Right? Or imagine your dinner guest tries to guilt trip you into feeding them. Yeah. If you really cared, you would cook me dinner tonight. Pack your bags. We're going on a guilt trip. So, this game, how can I make life more wonderful? It turns out human beings love it. We love that power that we have to contribute to life, but it only works when we have choice. As soon as I feel manipulated, coerced, pressured, like forced to do it, fuck it, it's not fun anymore. Anybody here prefer I not be too potty-mouthed? Anybody here offended if I use bad language? I'm naturally pretty potty-mouthed, and I like to be real and authentic in my workshops, but I can dial it back if it offends anybody. All right, cool. I've had a couple people over the years say, hey, please dial it back. Yeah, so let me drill down a little deeper into the purpose of it. Actually, let me slow myself down. Okay. Because I want to harp on this concept of quality of connection a little more. It's so key. Think about when you've been really disconnected from someone. Like really disconnected. Like the slightest thing they do is highly annoying, right? The way they talk, the way they dress, the way they walk, the way they breathe. It's like super irritating. So now look at the inverse. Flip that around and think about when you're very, very connected with someone. The quality of connection is really high. And this person spills a whole pot of coffee in the middle of your living room. Or they accidentally dent your car. What's your response when you're feeling very connected? No problem, no big deal, no worries. Yeah, we're suddenly like the most compassionate person on the planet. Totally understanding, like don't be too hard on yourself. It happens to the rest of us. Yeah, when the quality of connection is high, the route to prevent or resolve a misunderstanding or a conflict is way shorter. It's way faster. It's much easier. I do quite a bit of couples work, and the ones that are hardest to work with are where there's high pain and low trust. Because trust is like topsoil. It can get eroded really fast, and it can take a long time to build back up, if ever. So I just wanted to harp a little bit on this concept of quality of connection. And what nonviolent communication offers us are tools in these 3 different areas that I mentioned. How do I stay connected to myself so that I'm still being true to me when I'm connecting with you? And how am I present in such a way that you really feel heard? And how do I share what's going on for me even when it's scary to? Even when I think you're going to hate me if I tell you what's true for me? How do I preserve the quality of connection or even increase it? Increase the quality of the connection. So drilling down into the purpose a little bit more, remember there's the speaking side and the listening side. So from the speaking side, this is what NVC is about. How to speak my truth, how to share my perspective in a way that's most likely to result in harmony rather than conflict. How to speak my truth in a way that's most likely to elicit a compassionate response from the other person. And that's most likely to result in my own needs being met in a way that's in harmony with other people's needs. So that's from the speaking side. Then from the listening side, how can I be in the face of what sounds like judgment, blame, criticism, a verbal attack? How can I be in the face of that? And instead of hearing blame, judgment, criticism, a verbal attack, instead, where my attention goes are the needs, those things we had inside the circle. Because any judgment is really a tragic expression of an unmet need. Any judgment, that person is experiencing some kind of need. I'll give you an example. Like today when we were driving here, somebody cut me off, and I rolled the window down, and I yelled, "Asshole!" Didn't actually happen, just an example. Just a story. Thank you. But the theory behind that is that once the person hears me insult them and sees me flip them off, then they're going to start reflecting on their own driving and my needs for safety and consideration on the road. No, it doesn't work that way. Yeah, exactly. So we have this way of thinking and speaking that's tragic. That's about putting other people in a box, pigeonholing, labeling, avoiding responsibility, placing demands rather than requests, and thinking about who is good and who is bad, and therefore who deserves to be rewarded or punished. So justifying reward and punishment. So we have this whole way of thinking and speaking that actually gets in the way of the quality of connection we're looking for. I have a whole video online, half an hour, breaking that down. I'm not going to take the time right now because we have very short time together. But it's valuable to be on the same page about, okay, what's the thinking and language that is actually going to get in the way of the quality of connection we're looking for? So that instead of hearing blame, judgment, criticism, or a verbal attack, I can tune into, what's important to this person? What might their needs or values be when they say that? And then I'm much more likely to stand in a compassionate place and not get as defensive, and much more likely to diffuse a potential conflict. Yeah?
I was going to ask, what would you state the goal of this? Like, how can I face critique constructively? Is that a way to describe?
Yeah, I would call that a partial goal. I would call that part of the way there. Because the goal is, how do we create a quality of connection where we're both having fun playing this game of making life more wonderful. That's the ultimate goal, is having a high enough quality of connection that we can both just enjoy life and get on with it. Facing critique constructively, or in a way that's easier to hear, if somebody says, you're really disorganized and lazy, that's a lot harder to hear than if somebody says, like let's say I'm working at the co-op stocking the shelves and somebody says, oh look, if you put the label facing inside, people can't see the things as well, and when you get here 20 minutes late, it's hard for us to start our shift together as a team. So I might give specific observations, and they say, when you get here on time, it really contributes to our effectiveness as a team. So things like that, like I might go to the values or the needs rather than the judgment. Is that helpful? Yeah. Yeah, so one of the keys to giving feedback effectively is very clear observations, and then going to the needs or the values rather than some judgment about the other person. Yeah, any other questions or comments at this point?
So
Yeah.
I guess I'm trying to connect this. It's not the person that's frustrating me, it's a behavior. And if I can look at my needs,
Yeah.
their
And
behaviors, and separate their act related to my needs from the human. Is that what we're talking about?
well, I would add that I would take it even further, and I would say that what's bothering me isn't even their behavior; it's the meaning that I give to it. Let me draw something on here that might help to illustrate this. So you've heard of optical illusions, right? Well, there's something that's sort of like a mental delusion. I'm not sure, but I because you. Whoops. You because I. So I feel this way because you yelled at me. Or you feel this way because I did X, Y, or Z. So let's say that I'm hanging out in my bedroom, watching a movie, feeling relaxed, everything's good. And then my partner comes in. My partner's here, by the way. And this didn't actually happen. It's just an example. But let's say that she walks in and she's like, "What the heck is wrong with you? You're laying on the bed watching a movie, and you said you were going to let the dog out to go to the bathroom, and the dog pooped on the living room, and now you have to go and clean it up," and stomps out. And now I feel like shit. So on the surface level, it's really easy to think, well, I feel like shit because you came in, interrupted my movie, used this rude tone of voice, and yelled at me and didn't even ask me what happened about the dog. But actually, on a deeper level, I feel this way because I value something. There's something that's important to me. For example, I really value like a certain tone of voice when people talk to me. And I really value that that if somebody's going to talk to me, like if I'm in the middle of something, I really value that they check in, like, "Hey, I've got something that's really bothering me. Can you pause your movie? Is it okay if we talk about this?" I really value that. The other thing I really value is curiosity. So like, "Hey, I noticed that you said you were going to let the dog out to go to the bathroom, and there's a big dog poop in the middle of the living room, and I'm curious, like, what happened?" I really value that. And those things didn't happen, and so now I feel upset. So if we go deeper to what it is that's important to us, we start to tease these things apart. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. Questions at this point? I'm going to do a time check because these workshops can turn on a dime. Because if anybody wanted to do like a real role play, the whole rest of the workshop could go like out the window. We do a demonstration up here that can be pretty mind-blowing. But that would just be a demonstration. And anyway, I can tell you other stories. Let's see. I think we're ready for another exercise. Yeah? Something to do? Okay. This one's real quick. Everybody have something to write on and with? I think we might have some extras if anybody... Yeah, there are pens up here. There's a little cup full of pens. There's a little bit of extra paper. You guys want to share that? Yeah. I got some paper here for you guys. We want you to fill those out anyway, so yeah, perfect. If you guys want to divvy up this pad, there's a little extra paper here as well. Giant notebook over here if you need more paper. All right. So this is a really fast exercise because I'm going to give you maybe 10 seconds to write, and it's not this, but this is part of it later. Remember, we did these questions a little bit, peeling the layers of the onion. Think about your 5 favorite things to do. Just write them down. No censoring. That's why you have 10 seconds. Your 5 favorite things to do. Ready, set, go. This will be private to you if you want. No shame, just be honest. Your 5 favorite activities or 5 favorite things to do. Ready, set, go. 3, 4, 5. Okay. So what you're going to do with these questions is I'm going to ask you to find a partner. Could be the person next to you, could be someone else. And you're going to pick one from your list. Anyone, random. Doesn't have to be the first one. For example, riding my bicycle. And then the other person gets to ask me, so when you ride your bike, then what does that give you? Oh, it gives me exercise. Well, then when you have exercise, so they can keep going. When you have exercise in your life, then what do you have? Oh, health. And because it's mine, because it was my activity, riding a bicycle, I get to say, cool, I think we got to the deeper need. You don't have to take all the steps I explained about the window. It might be one question, it might be 2 or 3 to go deeper, but the person whose activity it is gets to say, okay, I think we got to the bottom. And then you switch, and the other person picks one, any random one, from their list, and then the person who went first gets to ask them these questions to see if you can find the deeper needs that are met or fulfilled through this activity. Any questions about the exercise? All right, ready, set, go. How was it? Yeah? Anyone get some new insight about something that you do? Anyone want to share? Yeah.
I don't know if this is a little too on the nose, but I love rock climbing. And I'd love to get out there, and I've been doing it for decades. And so my first surface answer is like, it gets me outside. Oh, great. When I'm outside, what does that get me? It gets me connected with nature. It gets me connected with myself. It gets me connected with my partner. And then underneath that, what am I getting when I am connected with nature and myself and others is I am learning about my own self. So it's like that root level of the tree is my self-connection. I'm learning to trust myself and learning, am I paying attention to the right things? in a rock climbing situation, the consequences are pretty severe and immediate. If you're paying attention to the right things, you're all right. If you're not paying attention to the right things, somebody's hanging on the end of a rope.
There's a certain level of learning and growth that's like really juicy about it for you. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Sweet. Yeah, please.
All of mine led to this sense of well-being.
Cool. Look at all these different things that you do.
I was surprised that they all ended up.
Yeah. No, I love it because that happens sometimes. Or sometimes different people who share the same activity and they're meeting totally different needs. They're the same activity. So it happens both ways. Yeah. Different activities contributing to the same need yeah. Great. Please, and then over here.
So we both kind of shared this love of preparing, eating, sharing food. And probably partly because of our culture and society, there's such an abundance that need that we're actually meeting there is not really nourishment. And ultimately it came down to a connection. Who we are sharing with.
Yeah. I like that a lot because once we get connected to the deeper need, then we might find that there's a dozen or 100 or 1,000 different strategies for contributing to those needs. Yes. Oh, wait, there was a hand here and then back here. Just a sec. Yeah.
Well, mine was reading. And what I get from reading is escape. And what I recognize is that escape in some ways has to do with not having responsibility for anything. I have no responsibility for what happens in this story, in the book that I'm reading.
Yeah.
And that's a very peaceful, wonderful feeling.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, you can just relax in the flow of the story. I like it. Thank you. Yes.
So a couple ago you said people sharing an activity can be solving different needs.
Yeah.
Is it more likely for people who are solving or sharing an activity that are solving the same need to be friends than someone who is not sharing or solving a different problem? Does that make sense? So if you're sharing an activity, and I apologize if that's super off base, but that's just my question.
So let me tell you your question back, make sure I'm getting it.
Yeah.
If the question is, two people who are doing the same activity to meet the same need versus two people who are doing the same activity to meet different needs, do I notice a difference in the quality of those relationships?
Absolutely.
No.
No. Really?
No, it has more to do actually with the quality of connection between those two people and the level of trust
In that activity.
with each other.
Okay.
Than it does with the activity itself or the deeper needs they're trying to meet.
Sure.
So I think that's a bigger kind of leverage point, or that makes a bigger difference. But no, I haven't seen a difference in the pattern. Yeah, Tess.
I wanted to add to that the level of self-connection can make a big difference with that. So if someone's participating in an activity, but there's actually a different activity that would meet those underlying needs a lot better, it may be more likely for them to switch activities.
Like, for example, if you and I go skiing, but I actually am going skiing just because I think I should, then I'm going to be less fun to be around. Like I might be more of a drag than if I'm like really into it because it really meets some deep needs. Does that relate to what you were saying?
Right, and so if the deeper need, for example, for that person who should be skiing, they're telling themselves, is connection, for example. If they're in touch with that need, they might say, hey, skiing buddy, I'd actually rather just go get coffee. And in that sense, the relationship might continue. But if they continue skiing and they're like, oh man, but then they discover like, oh, someone else who likes coffee, then they may switch.
Thank you. Yeah. And if they're both looking for connection, and they may find other strategies to meet that same need, etc. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
I have one that I didn't really expect to arrive at Seid, but it was playing with my kids.
Uh-huh.
And what I found, when you're playing with your kids, then what do you have? And I have this opportunity to share with them about the world or themselves or how to do things and stuff and things that I like to see in people and that type of thing. And so what I arrived at is that makes me have hope for their future because I can share things with them that are make them safer. And that makes me feel safe because my family is then safe even though I'm not there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. That's really cool that you discovered that. Yeah, and even if the world is safer in general or safer for them, it's still your need that's coming up. If I see somebody who's, needs are tricky in this way. If I see somebody who's really unhealthy and they're suffering from their health, and what comes up for me could be any number of feelings, but the deeper need, let's say, is health. I have these feelings. It's in relation to that person over there who's unhealthy, but it's what's alive in me is health. Is a need or an energy or a value around health. So it's my need, even though I'm perfectly healthy, and it's in relation to that person over there. It's still my need. But there's a paradox here. Because even though it's my need, needs are also impersonal. And the closest example I can come to explain this is that the words you're hearing right now coming from my mouth are my words, but at the same time, they're not my words. I did not invent the English language. English existed before I was born and will exist after I die. So in a very real way, these are not my words, but they're still my words. So needs are like that. They're completely impersonal. They're completely impersonal because we all share them, and it's part of our interconnectedness and interrelatedness. But at the same time, they're impersonal, but at the same time, if something's coming up for me, it's my need. And so it can be helpful if I own that. Yeah. More questions or anything about the exercise, and then we'll keep moving. All right. Well, I'll tell you a story and then give you another metaphor that might be useful, and then we'll just take it from there. So this is a story from Marshall himself, and it was from a time when he was invited to teach at a refugee camp in the Middle East. He was in Palestine, and he's entering this mosque, and there are 170 Palestinian men in the mosque, and as he's getting up on the stage, his interpreter turns to him and he says, "They're murmuring that you're an American." And a man in the audience gets up, points his finger at Marshall, and yells, "You murderer!" And then somebody else chimed in, "Child killer, assassin, butcher," and the whole room starts to get riled up. So Marshall and his interpreter are like, okay, hold on a second. And then Marshall turns to the guy who called him a murderer, and he says, "Sir, are you feeling upset because you would like my government to spend its resources in a different way?" Now, Marshall had gotten a clue because he had come across an empty tear gas canister that said "Made in the USA" outside on the street. So that gave him a clue maybe why this man was upset with him. He said, "Sir, are you upset because you would like my government to spend its resources in a different way?" The guy's like, "Damn straight. We don't need tear gas. We don't need bombs. We don't need armored bulldozers. We need houses. We need health clinics. We need schools." So Marshall, just hanging in there with him, followed up with, "So it sounds like you have a lot of intensity about the world knowing the kinds of conditions that you're living under." The guy's like, "That's right. You ever seen schools without books? You ever seen children playing in the open sewers?" And again, Marshall, hanging in there with him, responded, "So it sounds like you only want for your children what any parent would want for their own children." The guy's like, "That's right." And this went on for about 40 minutes of this man essentially venting and Marshall demonstrating a different way of listening. Now I think about the other responses Marshall could have had. He could have gotten defensive and say, you can't call me that, right? You don't know me or my work. Don't call me a murderer." Well, that wouldn't have gone very far. Or he could have thought, "Oh my gosh, I am such an idiot. An American with the last name Rosenberg. In a like, what am I doing here? And I'm not safe," tuck his tail between his legs and run. But instead, what he did is he hung in there with this person, and instead of hearing a judgment or a criticism, "You murderer," he went deeper. To like, is this why you're upset? Is this what's going on? So once the guy was done venting, he stopped talking. That's typically what happens when somebody gets enough empathy. First thing is they stop talking. And the second thing is that you can feel a shift. You can feel it in your body. A whole room full of people can feel it. It's almost like the barometric pressure shifts a little bit. Like it just gets a little more vulnerable and real. And when the guy was done talking, then Marshall came back with his honesty. And he said, well, sir, I feel rather frustrated right now because I was invited to teach something here. So would it work for you if I continue with the remainder of our time? The guy was like, yeah, go ahead. So Marshall went on with his presentation. At the end of his presentation, the same man who had called Marshall a murderer came up to Marshall and invited him to have Ramadan dinner with his family. So these are the kinds of shifts that are possible when we can shift the quality of the connection. Now there's a real important metaphor in this story, and I'm going to call it the tube of communication. So I have my friend Don back here in the second row. Let's say Don and I are having a conversation, and imagine that there's a tube, like a poster tube or a clear plastic tube, and Dawn wants to get her point across, so she puts her scarf through the tube. But I want to get my point across at the same time, so I put my scarf through the tube. So what happens? Yeah, it's clogged. Like, she's not getting heard, I'm not getting heard. The tube's now clogged. Neither one of us is getting what we want. So if I can take my scarf and put it here for a moment, now I can allow her scarves to come through. Yeah, of course. And I can even check with her. Red one? Next one. Green one? Like that. Now, once she feels fully heard, now there's no more scarves. Now the tube's empty. Now I can take mine that I put on the shelf. I wasn't denying my truth or repressing anything, just putting it here momentarily. Now I can come through. So this is what happened in this story, right? The other man had 40 minutes worth of scarves. And Marshall just hung in there with him, demonstrating a different quality of listening. And when the guy was done, then Marshall came with his truth. He said, I feel rather frustrated. I was invited to teach. May we continue? So the tube of communication is a metaphor that you can use, and some of the tools I've been offering tonight are things that you can use in your interactions. So let's say suddenly you're like, I don't know, something's going on for you. You can start to go deeper to what's important. If you have an interaction that's not working, remember this. The other person is more likely to hear you out if they feel heard first. That's one of the lessons of this metaphor of the tube of communication. So I thought I would share that story because it's really valuable and useful in all kinds of contexts. Here's part of how the dynamic. Here's another, just a different visual for it. Here's a very artistically rendered person. These two people are exchanging information. But they're also exchanging information here. And what happens when emotions start to get intense, start to get riled up? You start to get a little bit of this. But emotions can get really intense, and it creates this turbulence that doesn't allow this channel to get through because this one is so loud. So when I work with people, typically we work with this energy first and get this part to kind of settle down a little bit. The emotional energy. Thanks for asking. Yeah, I work with the one that typically, if it's really intense, it creates that turbulence that gets in the way of, like, what do you want for dinner? You ever had somebody joke with you? They were playing, but you got offended? Or you ever play with someone and they got offended? Yeah, it happens a lot. And it's part of an exercise that I'd like to do where I'll demonstrate 4 options we have for how to hear any message. But I also want us to practice it. I feel torn because I have so much good stuff I want to give you, and I'm kind of greedy. I want to give you everything, but we have short time. So let me explain this, and then I'll go to the 4 options for how to interpret any message. Here's in a way, here's another way of understanding how nonviolent communication works. How I am and what I would like, how you are and what you would like. And then down here, there's some strategy or solution. Let's say that there's a disconnect between us. The tendency, the pattern that often happens is we jump to fix it. We jump to a solution. And usually, we're skipping the connection to get to a solution. So my child's crying, "Oh, don't worry, honey, Daddy will buy you a new one." Jump to a strategy. Or, "Okay, fine, boss, I will take on that extra project." In all kinds of situations, we jump to solve it or fix it before creating a connection. Yeah?
So had Michael in the room of 170 guys, and they're all mad at him, had he said, "What can I do to fix this?" that wouldn't have gone very well, because there was no connection. Because there was disconnect.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, that's one way of looking at that. Yeah. You know, and it reminds me of that saying, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Tattoo that one on your inside of your eyelid. So what MVC teaches me is that instead of jumping to solve it and fix it, to spend a little time here at the level of connection. I call that go slow to go fast. Because what happens if there's a disconnect and I jump to a solution, I don't know that the solution is going to work for everybody. I haven't taken the time to find out what's important to each of these people. I haven't taken the time to bring to the surface the needs. So how do I know that my solution is meeting the needs? I don't. Because I haven't taken the time to figure out what the needs are. So if we take some time here, it doesn't have to be forever, but take some time there. Once you're connected, fine, problem solve all day if that's what you need to do. But if you if you skip the connection, I call that go fast to go slow, because then the solution is going to create more conflict because we don't know that it's meeting all the needs. Very often it doesn't, and then there's more cleanup or more stuff to work out later. So slow down, create a connection. Now all the needs are on the table. Now we know what we're problem solving about. Yes.
So I'm a little bit curious about what exactly you mean by connection and how to achieve it.
Yeah. Yes. Good. You want me to respond to that?
Yes.
Yeah. So well, I wasn't sure if there was more. Did anyone not hear the question or comment? She said she's curious what I mean by connection and how to achieve it. Thank you. So I talked earlier about high quality of connection. I've identified at least 2 levels of high quality of connection. One level is we understand each other. So my friend Joshua is here. So I trust that Joshua understands what my needs are, and he trusts that Alan understands what his needs are. So now we have mutual understanding. That's one level of quality of connection. A whole other level goes a little deeper, I think. A deeper level or a higher level, depending on what metaphor you want to use, is Joshua trusts that his needs matter to Alan. And Alan trusts that his needs matter to Joshua. That's another deeper level. So then it gets really easy. But whichever one of the 2 you get to, whether it's mutual understanding or trusting that our needs matter to the other person, now at least the needs are on the surface and we can problem solve around the needs. So let me give you just an example. Let's say that Tess wasn't here tonight. Let's say that she stayed home and then I go back home after this workshop kind of late. I worked all day plus, tonight 6:30 to 9. I get home and I'm so tired. And she meets me at the door a little bit more dressed up than usual. And she says, "Surprise, got us a babysitter. Let's go out to dinner and see a movie." And I'm thinking, fuck that. I just want to lay in bed, or I want to lay on the couch and watch a movie, or just nobody talk to me, just for at least an hour. And then I can talk to people. On the surface level, there's a conflict, right? She wants to go out to dinner, see a movie. I want to stay home, lay on the couch. Now we have a conflict. But let's say that we get curious and we ask those questions, that peeling the layers of the onion. And I'm like, so, what is it about going out to dinner and seeing a movie? Help me understand. And she might say something like connection, fun, downtime and relaxation. Okay, I have those needs too. They may not be up for me at this moment. Well, downtime, yes. But I can still relate to the needs because we all have the same needs. And then she asks me, she gets curious, so if you laid on the couch for an hour without anyone talking to you, then what would you have? And we peel the layers of the onion, go deeper, and I'm like, oh, it's all about self-nurturing. Self-care, downtime, relaxation, recharging the batteries. Now that all the needs are on the surface, that's when we can get creative about strategies. Because remember, for any set of needs, there could be 100 or 1,000 strategies. So now we get into the creative problem solving. Ooh, what if we send the babysitter out with the kids and we get takeout and watch a movie at home? Or what if we, do something different, right? Or oh, I've got tomorrow off. I'll get all my downtime needs met tomorrow. Yes, and I feel a shift. I'm not giving in and I'm not giving up. I feel a genuine change of heart. And I'm like, yeah, I could go out to dinner and see a movie because I get to relax all day tomorrow and it could be fun. So I have a shift. So again, we can explore the strategies once we've surfaced the needs. I did a mediation once in a nonprofit where one person was expressing what didn't work for her. She was crying. Before she was done, somebody else jumped in with so much compassion. What can we do to make this better for you? How can we resolve this? And before she was done, somebody else jumped in. What did we miss as a nonprofit, as a system? Something fell through the cracks, and we need to make sure this doesn't happen again. And I stopped them. I said, whoa, hold on. And it went back to the first person who had been crying. I said, was there something you were wanting from the group in relation to what you shared? And she said, oh, no, I just wanted to be heard. We could have spent an hour fixing and resolving, and we could have spent an hour investigating what fell through the cracks and never touched this person's need. So we slow down to really surface, what's happening at that deeper level, and then we can problem solve. Now, there's a specific set of mechanics here, and I wasn't planning to go into them tonight, which is a great time to announce a skill building workshop coming up. Where we'll actually go in depth with a lot of the tools and develop skillfulness with the tools. I'll mention that regardless. I talked about how life-alienated thinking and language is often about placing demands on others versus requests. I grew up in a very loving but very confused household, and it was confused because there's confusion about how we motivate each other. So we had a very peculiar definition of love. Let me know if you recognize this definition of love. If you loved me, you would know what I'm needing, when I need it, how I need it, and if you don't give it to me, it just means you don't care. Oh, and I shouldn't have to ask because then it's just not the same. Anybody recognize that definition of love? Yeah. So the yardstick of how much somebody cares about you is the degree to which they're psychic. In NVC, we take responsibility for what we're wanting by expressing a clear request. But in an NVC request, I'm able to hear a no with as much love as a yes. If I'm not open to a no, then it's a demand, not a request. Because the other person's needs don't matter to me equally to my own. I'll give you an example about this. I was about to drive to Seattle to go see a client, and I was dressed in a suit with a tie, and I was running late. I was rushing, and I was at the front door tying my shoes, and my partner at the time, Trisha, shows up with a garbage bag, and she says, would you be willing to take the trash out on your way out? My response was, are you open to hearing my needs that get in the way of saying yes right now? That was my response. She's been doing this work for a long time too, so she knew exactly what I was talking about. She was like, sure. I was like, well, I'm kind of running a little late, and I don't want whatever's on the trash bag or whatever to get on my clean clothes, and would it work for you if I just take it out when I get back? She was like, sure, no problem. So that's one of the ways that we hear no, is we try to hear the needs behind the no. Because anytime somebody says no, they're saying yes to something else. So, what's the yes to? And it's also how we express no, is we express the needs that are getting in the way of saying yes. At any rate, going back to requests, expressing clear requests of each other, there are action requests, like, would you be willing to get me a cup of water, or would you be willing to, go park the car? Some action, right? And then we have connecting requests, and that's what we're doing in here. These are requests that specifically serve the connection, and I'll tell you two. And I love practicing these, and I had a different plan for tonight, but I'll describe them anyway. One of them is confirming that message sent and message received were the same. And it can sound lots of different ways. Like, you picking up what I'm putting down? Huh? Yeah, tell me back what you heard. I want to know whether you're getting it. Or you could say, would you be willing to tell me back what you heard me say, just so that I know I'm being as clear as I would like to be? Some form of, could you reflect that back to me? Could you tell me back what you're understanding? Some form of that. It's awkward to make that request because we're not used to it in this culture. And if you've ever had the experience of hanging out with a friend or your partner and everything's just fine, you're going along, everything's cool, and suddenly, like 15 minutes later, you're in a fight or a conflict, and you're like, how the heck did we get here? Anyone ever had that experience? Yeah. If you haven't had that experience, pretty much all of us have. And what I've noticed happens in those moments is that at some point, somebody said yellow and the other person heard blue and nobody noticed, and we kept talking. And now we're drifting apart, and then we're in a conflict. So this question, could you tell me back what you heard me say? Or could you tell me back what you're hearing is important to me? Is not about testing their listening skills. It's about confirming that message sent and message received were the same. Yeah, so that's one connecting request. Asking for their understanding. Just a sec. The other one is asking for their honesty. Hey, now that I've shared this, what comes up for you? Or now that I've told you what happened today, how do you feel about that? So those are two connecting requests, and they keep this flow moving back and forth. So I share my scary honesty. Could you tell me back what you heard? Yeah, I heard some really scary honesty. Oh, thank you. How are you feeling about that? So now this person gets to share their scary honesty. Well, this and this. Could you tell me that back? They reflect back. Now, how do you feel about that? And this keeps it moving. This keeps that flow moving, those connecting requests. We weren't going to work on that today. I wasn't even going to mention them, but your question drew them out. Thank you. Yeah. And they're really valuable because they keep this flow going so that we can get connected before trying to fix it without connection, because that usually doesn't fix it. Yes?
No, I just think that it's so important what you said there with the 2 points, because sometimes I've noticed myself interpreting, going a level behind just hearing, but interpreting.
Oh, yeah.
And by being curious about what did you hear, and then how do you interpret it, you also help the other person.
Yeah.
Separate what they're interpreting.
Yeah.
And what they're actually hearing too.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't usually ask them what they're interpreting. I usually get that automatically when I ask them what they heard. And we're all interpreting all the time. It's, can I be aware of the fact that I'm telling myself a story about what happened? Separate that from an observation. Briefly, this is the model of nonviolent communication. It has 2 parts, honesty and empathy, also known as giving and receiving. The speaking side, the listening side. And each of these has 4 components. So these 4 components fit under honesty and they fit under empathy. A clear observation, like what actually happened. and not mixing in my evaluation, my analysis, and my interpretation. Just a clear observation. How do I feel about it? Because something is important to me. The need is like a flower, and the feeling is like the scent of the flower. They're connected, and the feeling can take me to the deeper need. And then making a clear request. For example, when I remember that we agreed to meet at 2 and you're arriving at 4, I feel some frustration because I have a need for consideration. So would you be willing to let me know what got in the way of getting here at the time we agreed? So that's an example of all 4 components in one sentence. That's different than you're irresponsible or you have no consideration or the ways that so many of us often talk to each other. That takes us away from the quality of connection we're looking for, and therefore the results and the outcomes that are most satisfying. So go slow to go fast. Connection before solution. Yeah.
So you've done this talk internationally, so there's probably a lot of contrast in social norms that like Britain, or harmonious societies like Japan would have different keeping up appearances, so they would have more difficulty with like maybe feelings or needs. What do you see that's unique to the Pacific Northwest in our region?
What do I see that's unique to the Pacific Northwest in our region?
Late, is a thing.
I like that.
Yeah.
But what is like something that, because people also, I've seen different, like when people come from here, from different regions to the Pacific Northwest, they notice people here are a little bit more cold and hard to get
to know.
Yeah, to get into the little social circles.
Mm-hmm.
But
it
would be interesting to see.
Yeah, I'd have to sit with that. Okay. I don't have it right off the top of my head. I need to sit with that because there is really a unique culture here.
Yeah.
And
we're not like Minnesotans or...
No, and even, I lived in Seattle for 7 years before moving up here. I've lived in this area for almost 20 years. And Whatcom County even has its own unique thing that's a little different from some other places. So, and I'm concerned that spending too much time on this would take us away from the thing I'd love us to practice. So, but I'm going to sit with that. Yeah, thank you. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think people here genuinely want a high quality of connection with others. But yeah, there's a lot that influence. Just being on the West Coast culture is different. So yeah, I'm going to sit with that. Thank you. Yeah. One of my mentors in this process, Lucy Liu, she's from Taiwan, and her father was from a particular generation of men from China where they just didn't talk about their feelings. And so she could connect with her dad great until she got to the feelings part, and then he would shut down and disconnect. So with him, culturally, she would take out the feelings part. She would go observation, need, request, and everything was cool. As soon as she talked about feelings, that got in the way. So that was a cultural adaptation she did for her father, the particular generation of men from China. So I promised you that I would demonstrate 4 options for how to hear any message, and I would love for us to practice it. So first I'll demonstrate, and then we'll do a little fun. And unfortunately, we're almost out of time. So I talked about giraffe and jackal. So I brought these high-tech tools to illustrate. I got them at Best Buy. This is that consciousness that we were calling jackal, as a verbal shorthand, the metaphor of criticizing, putting people in the box, blaming, avoiding responsibility, placing demands on others, justifying reward and punishment. So this is that judgmental consciousness, right? From the inside of that consciousness, I can direct my attention outward toward others. And I can also take it and turn it toward myself. So those are 2 options. And then I can also take these. Now this is the consciousness we've been talking about a high quality of connection and taking responsibility for what I'm needing and wanting, making clear requests. And again, from this consciousness, we can call it a compassionate consciousness, I can direct my attention outward or inward toward myself. So that gives us 4 options. Just to demonstrate it, I'd like somebody here to say something that could hurt my feelings.
NVC is completely useless.
I know you can do better than that, Atul, because I don't give a shit about defending NVC. I really don't. So you need to make it personal. Yeah.
Corduroy is so 1970.
Don't make it about my pants. Make it about me.
And deep down, there's an emotion that makes it personal for you.
I don't care about corduroy. But yes, please. Yes. Did anyone not hear that? He said, "You're an asshole." Would you be willing to repeat that a few more times? Because I want to demonstrate each of these 4. Okay, so first, the jackal consciousness outward. Yeah, fuck you. Right? Read between the lines, man. Or a line I learned from Marshall: go fuck yourself and it'll be the worst sex you ever had. That's the jackal consciousness outward, right? It's sort of like, oh yeah, you're going to insult me? Well, I'm going to insult you back. It's like, it acts like an armor or a shield. Like, I'm not going to let your judgments penetrate. I'm going to get you back. And so that's that jackal consciousness outward. Jackal consciousness inward, one more time.
You're an asshole.
Fuck, now I feel terrible about myself. Now I've taken his judgment and internalized it. So with these ears inward, I'm guaranteed to experience some form of shame or guilt or depression. With these ears outward, I'm guaranteed to experience some form of anger or rage. And some of us are earbidextrous. You're bad, I'm bad. You're wrong, I'm wrong. It's not a very fun world to live in. So those are 2 of the options, right? I make you wrong or I make myself wrong. Maybe both. So now we'll start with the giraffe ears inward. I'll show you the 3rd option starting in. So go ahead. Now I have an opportunity to connect with what's in my heart, and I'm talking about feelings and needs. Let's say that I feel irritation because I have a need for understanding. I want to be seen differently. Like, I don't see myself as an asshole, and I'd like him to see me a little bit more in alignment with how I see myself. So I feel irritated. Notice how that's different from judging him or judging myself.
Can you explain it again?
Yeah, I have a need for understanding and I feel irritation. So when I turn this consciousness inward, I'm connecting with what's in my heart, and maybe that's what's going on.
So it's sort of a
Self-connection.
right. I'm not expressing to this person what I want them to see.
I don't know that.
Okay.
I might be expressing exactly what I want them to see, but it's their interpretations, their filters, their story about it may be different.
Right.
All it is that I can take any judgment somebody throws at me and connect with what's in my heart in a way that doesn't judge them back and doesn't judge myself. Another example, when he calls me an asshole, is maybe I feel sadness because I have a need for acceptance and belonging. Again, that's different from judging him back or judging myself. All human beings have this need around acceptance and belonging, and I feel some sadness. Again, no problem. I'm not judging him back or judging myself. So I saw a hand here and then over here.
So you can go from an inward jackal to an inward giraffe.
Yes.
With like one sentence.
Yeah.
In theory, right? I mean, you can go from,
To-
you're right, I am an asshole, to, well, what can I do to, well, not what can I do to change it, but basically a connection as to why that person thinks that you're an asshole.
Or just when they think that, this is what comes up for me. It's not a desire to attack them back, and it's not a desire to make myself wrong. Yeah, that's self-connection. And to make it a stable part of my experience, so that it's second nature to go to feelings and needs rather than judgments, that takes practice. That takes practice to make it second nature, just like learning an instrument or learning manual transmission, driving it. Just like after a while, you're not even thinking about it. And same with NVC.
I want to comment on that then too. Is I like to, when I start having those jackal thoughts, whether they're outwards or inwards, I try and use that as my red flag, my indicator, to then turn the giraffe ears and check in with myself on what's going on.
Yeah. You caught that? Yeah.
Why am I feeling this way?
Yeah. Yeah. So as soon as I start judging myself or somebody else, that can be an indicator like, whoa, I'm disconnected from my needs. Let's come back. Thank you. Was this on this piece? Yeah, go ahead, and then we'll go here.
Well, I just want to share that I had some trouble identifying when I was in the jackal ears for quite some time because it wasn't always a clear thought like, oh, I'm bad. But sometimes my energy about it would just be like that, like, and so what I discovered was that even if I wasn't having like a thought, I could still connect with what am I feeling and needing. And so now I recognize that when I'm have like an internal like sense in my body of like this certain thing, like, oh, I'm in this like jackal energy.
Yeah.
Even before I've identified a specific thought.
Yeah, well, you have an advantage over a lot of us in that you practice a sister practice to nonviolent communication called focusing, which is very body-based, and I love it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just another way of approaching it.
I love that,
like
yeah.
You can see the thought, you can recognize the feeling, or you can feel it in your body.
Yes, bingo, thank you. Thank you. Mind and body are only separate in language. Wiggle your toes. Can you feel that? Your mind is there, right? The brain is a physical organ. The mind goes way beyond. And so if you're tuned into your body, it might be a thought or it might be some other sensation that tells you, like, I could spend a little time connecting to what is this about. Thank you, Tess. Yeah.
I'm still listening.
What's that?
I'm still listening.
Okay, so I've covered 3 options, right? Judgmental out, judgmental in, compassionate in, and now one more time. So now I get to connect to what's in his heart without hearing the judgment, going for what might be important to him. So then I can get curious, right? I'm wondering if he feels irritation because he really wanted more consideration in this situation. And most of us are not trained to say, I'm feeling irritated because I have a need for consideration. Most of us are trained to say, you're an asshole, and make the other person wrong about it. Make them responsible for how we're feeling. So these are the 4 options. Or maybe the need wasn't consideration. Maybe the need is connection, and he's being playful, and he's just messing around. That happens too. One of the important things you'll find as you go into this work is that there's a difference, there's a whole spectrum between formal nonviolent communication, which is what we practice in a classroom setting or a workshop setting, versus informal NVC, also known as street giraffe. One of my very closest friends and I, we live on the same property out in the county, and we'll see each other, and one of us or the other will be like, "Hey, what's up, fucker?" Now, that's street giraffe because of the intention that's there. If you go deeper with it, hey, if you want to unpack it, hey, when I see you over there on the property, I feel joy in my heart because my need for companionship and brotherhood is met, and so would you be willing to just take that in? So that's shorthand for all that. So let me be really... Yeah. Well, it could, street giraffe doesn't even need words. Like let's say we're sitting at the dinner table together and my mouth is full and I turn to the water pitcher and I go, what do you hear?
I don't hear anything, I see.
Yeah, and so what do you interpret when I do this?
That you would like some water.
Yeah, I don't need to say, when I notice my throat is dry, I feel thirst because I have a need for water, so would you be willing to... I don't need to go unpack it into formal. Formal is really useful in a classroom or workshop setting. It trains our attention for where to go. It trains us to keep some of these key distinctions clear. But most of the time, we're going to be focusing on connection, not on speaking NVC. So it has some nuance. Notice I titled this sheet NVC model. I did that intentionally because this is not NVC. Is anyone confused? I saw a couple hands go up. This is the model, meaning it's the tools. They give us skillful means. But what NVC is actually it's the intentionality and the consciousness that I bring to my interactions. If my intention is to create a high quality of connection, and I have the willingness to work toward a win-win outcome or a mutually agreeable outcome, that's NVC. I don't care what words you use. I don't care if this is in your mind or not. If my intention is to get my way or to manipulate a specific outcome, I can be using language that sounds like this, but that's not NVC at all. It's a jackal dressed in giraffe clothing. And so I've had people come to my workshops who are like, I was on the receiving end of NVC being used as a weapon. I was like, sorry, that's not NVC. Because they missed the intention. They missed the consciousness of it. If you go for the mechanics, but you're trying to manipulate an outcome or get your way, it's not NVC, even if you're using words that sound like NVC. So this is the model, but what NVC is, it's the consciousness and the intentionality we bring to our interactions. Did I see a hand up?
Could you put words to the giraffe outward again?
Yeah.
Because I didn't fully comprehend it.
And I will, and I want to highlight that each of these 4 options I could keep to myself, or I could express it out loud. So that gives us 8 possibilities. So this one, when I kept it to myself, I was like, I wonder if he's feeling some irritation because he'd like consideration in this situation. But I can ask it as a question too. Are you feeling irritated because you were really hoping for more consideration in the situation? And he might say, don't condescend me. I still have 4 options, no matter what he says. I can still make him wrong, or I can make myself wrong. Or I can tune in to what my feelings and needs are, or I can tune into what might have been his feelings and needs. In fact, the communication could be the person just stomps out and slams the door. Maybe that's the entire communication. I still have 4 options. So, yes, question.
So there's a situation in my life where when these people come together, it seems like 99.9% of the time, if there's jackal communication going on. So, and that can be really overwhelming for me.
Sure. I would love for you to have a really strong pair of these internally.
Yeah.
So that you can stay in that consciousness of giving yourself compassion for how painful that is, how hard it is. Yeah.
I forgot my question.
And then you might be able to tune into their feelings and needs. Like, when they say that, I wonder what might be the deeper need. And I noticed that there's feelings coming up for you, and that's such a sweet place when you're connected to life, even if it's grieving and mourning, versus being in that jackal thinking of who's right and who's wrong. Yeah. If you remember your question before we end, put it out there. Yes.
I was wondering if you could speak at all. Are there certain situations in which it's safe to do certain kinds of jackal versus giraffe? Like, are there situations in which you shouldn't do this because it might potentially be unsafe? Like the potential for conflict to escalate to violence, I guess.
Well, everything in the tools works in the direction of de-escalation and in the direction of a high quality of connection. There are times when I might need to physically extract myself from a situation to create safety. And then there's another distinction that I wasn't going to bring up tonight either, that usually comes up in more advanced workshops. That's the distinction between protective use of force versus punitive use of force. A very simple example might be when if I'm in town with my 2-year-old runs into the street, I'm going to grab my 2-year-old against their will and put them somewhere safe, a backpack, car seat, and that would be I'm protecting life. I'm using force to protect life. Punitive use of force might look like, you stupid little boy, now daddy's going to spank you so you learn about cars. Now, NVC, some people think NVC is supposed to be like Spock, like, I feel very upset right now because, and it's not like that. It can be full of energy. It could be like, oh my gosh, daddy was really scared and he really wants you to be safe. It can still be full of passion, but I'm not making anybody wrong. I'm not judging anybody. And there are situations when I might need to take strong verbal or physical action, and that might even look like extricating myself. Now, sometimes using more words can get in the way of a situation, so I might want to know like when to switch to silent empathy versus like constantly reflecting out loud. That's the half-hour mark, that alarm. So usually the limitation is our skill level. not the tools. Because having a tool is one thing, and being skillful with a tool is another. Sometimes the limitation is our imagination. We just can't think of other possibilities, other solutions in a particular situation. I'm wondering if this answers your question.
I mean, it does. I guess I was thinking, this is sounding like more like personal relationships. I'm just thinking about political conflicts in our country, trying to talk about that divide and how some people get physically violent.
Yeah.
And if these tools are appropriate for that, or if it's more of a personal relationship kind of thing.
Both, and the bigger dream in nonviolent communication is actually social change. So how do we transform systems and structures of oppression, of exclusion, and that gets. I would want people to have an even higher skill level. If I were given a half an hour meeting with Donald Trump, I would need about 3 days of empathy ahead of time for that half hour to actually be constructive, so that I get very clear about my needs and my request going in, and so that I can be present with somebody without demonizing or dehumanizing them. And it would be a much more constructive half hour if I get those 3 days of empathy ahead of time. So there are ways that we can create access to people who have their hands on the levers of power, or we can try to make ourselves that person by getting involved. And I would want us just to have a higher skill level. So yeah, there is. I like the direction that you're taking it, and it goes way beyond just interpersonal communication. So somebody invites me, for example, I'm doing a webinar for a group in Brazil on NVC in the workplace, and if I get invited to work in a workplace, I really only want to work with workplaces who are also willing to transform systems and structures, not just to have everybody feel good making more widgets in the world, because we don't need more widgets. So if they're willing to go to a deeper level, then I'll play. So yeah. And there's other trainers who will do just the interpersonal piece, and that's fine. Thanks for your question. Yeah. Any burning questions or comments or anything? Yes.
I don't know if you're going to do this anyway, but I'd love sort of a summary of what you consider the tools that we've covered tonight.
Well, we looked at the 3 areas where you can put your attention: expressing yourself toward others, being present with others in how you listen, and then also being connected with yourself. We talked about universal human needs and the distinction between needs and strategies. And when we confuse the two, it gets us into trouble, especially close relationships. If I think, you are my need, it's like that is so heavy for the other person. We looked at exercises for understanding our own or others' deeper motivations by asking the peeling the layers of the onion questions. We looked at the tube of communication. We looked at the most overlooked insight to preventing and resolving conflicts, right here. Connection before solution, connection before correction, connection before education. We looked at 4 options for how to hear any message. So we covered a good amount of stuff.
Bravo.
Yeah. Yes.
So earlier, someone behind me had a question, and it was in regards to how do you have a connection with someone and something else. But the biggest thing is for me is the connection. You can have hundreds of connections in a day. The bigger question is how deep that connection goes. Yeah.
Yeah, and or just the quality of it. So like when I'm like I was trying to get here, and I went and I bought this ginger ale, right? And I would have been late if I would have been like with the cashier, like, yeah, and so tell me about your dream last night, or like let's get real, like deep. It's like I wasn't looking for that relationship with the cashier. And yet it was kind, it was friendly.
Depth and quality are not the same.
They're not the same. Yeah, I like both. Yeah, and sometimes, especially, for example, I mentioned the workplace, especially in a workplace setting, people aren't there to have emotional depth, so you're looking for enough connection in order to fulfill the purpose of why we're here together, that kind of thing.